Hello, crypto world. Welcome to the Chart Historian. My name is Justin, and on this channel, I delve deep into crypto charts, exploring chart structures, fractals, and patterns. In this video, I'd like to talk about the XRP bull run structure. Now, this is going to be an important video because you can refer back to this video for a basic guide on XRP bull runs. XRP bull runs have a repetitive structure to them. Let me repeat that again. XRP bull runs have a repetitive structure. Today's bull run is following this structure. Now, XRP is actually a very repetitive chart. It's not just the bull runs that are repetitive. It's also the declines and the range-bound times. So let me give you a brief understanding of this macro structure that XRP has. So there are three basic parts to the XRP chart. There is a bull run. After the bull run comes a decline, and after the decline comes a sideways range-bound time. Every single one of these bigger structures is repetitive. Now, we're not going to go into the decline, but I'll briefly show you the repetitive structure of the sideways range-bound time to make the case that we are indeed in the bull run today. I split this sideways range-bound time up into three separate fractals, and I'm going to make this quick because most of you guys are well aware of this structure. So in the first fractal, there's part A, and in part A, price moves up and moves back down. In part B, price goes flat. Sometimes it arches down. We see the same thing happen over here. In fractal 1, part A, price moves up and moves back down, and then part B, it went flat. In fractal 2, there are three waves, wave A, wave B, and wave C. We see that over here with wave A, wave B, and wave C. In fractal 3, price moves up to a peak, which is part A, and then in this instance, it crashed into a low, which is part B. It then recovers, does a smaller correction, and goes into the bull run. Over here, it played out uniquely. It went up to part A, which is the peak. It then declined. It did not crash into part B, which was the low. It then recovered, did a smaller correction, and then now it's going into the bull run. Every single time this structure, and this is true of all parts of this chart, every single time a structure repeats, the timing, height, and depth, those parts of the repetitive pattern do not repeat. So the idea will repeat. So for instance, in fractal 1 with part A where price moves up and moves back down, and then part B where it goes flat or arches down, that will repeat. In fractal 2, the three waves, that will repeat. But look how it looks different in fractal 2 from this fractal 2. Every single time the idea repeats, but the timing, height, and depth, that lends to novelty in the way it repeats. I hope that is clear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the very beginning of the XRP chart. Now, this chart starts with a sideways range-bound time. Let's zoom in on that. So here is that sideways range-bound time with part A where it moves up and down and part B where it goes flat. In fractal 2, look how high it moved up in part A, but it's the three waves, wave A, wave B, and a small wave C. In fractal 3, price moves up to a peak, crashes, recovers, does a small correction, and then goes into the bull run. We will focus on this first bull run. Now, I need to zoom into a small time frame in order to really examine this structure. And in order to do that, I am going to jump over to CoinTrader Pro. Okay, so here I am on CoinTrader Pro. And for those of you who want to know how to get to this site, it's charts.cointrader.pro. You can see it in the web address up here. Here is that sideways range-bound time. Now I am on an hour candle, so it's a much more nuanced picture of this early bull run structure. So this bull run structure starts when price moves up from that small correction in the third fractal. So it moves up into these three separate corrections. Now, just as I explained to you in the past that the timing, height, and depth can add novelty to a structure that is repeating, well, we're going to see that play out on the bull run structures as well. So this first bull run takes place from November 25th to December 5th, 2013. We see price move out of this sideways range-bound time. So we are in the process right now of this move up into the first correction. We haven't even begun the first correction. Now, this first correction has a unique profile to it. It basically moves up, and you're going to have typically a large pullback. It's not always a large pullback, but it generally is. So we should expect a potentially large pullback on today's bull run structure. So price will move up, it pulls back, it then kind of bottoms out. This one shot up and then started grinding its way up out of this structure. The next structure is barely visible on this first bull run structure, but the essence of it, here I am, I zoomed in a little more. It moves up, there's one little correction, moves up, and there's another correction. It then moves out into the third correction, and this is the final correction before moving up into the peak structure. So this peak was two peaks, actually, and then kind of a smaller consolidation before dropping. Let's move on to the next time this structure plays out, and we can see how the similarities are there and how it changes. Okay, so we just examined this bull run structure. The next time a bull run structure takes place is right over here, and it's a smaller structure than this one. So we're going to zoom in on CoinTrader Pro and examine this structure now. So here is that structure. This takes place from November 15th to December 18th, 2014. This is the second bull run structure. And by the way, folks, this decline part, it is also a structured decline. It's not chaos. There's order to it. I'm not going to get into that in today's video. So let's zoom in onto this first structure. Price moves out of that third range-bound fractal, comes to the biggest correction that takes place in the bull run at this point, and you have that pullback, and this is very common. You get these fake outs in this structure right here, and then it starts grinding up. You know, on my Patreon, I have a series of videos under collections where I deep dive each of these structures. I also give you clues as to what is taking place before the peak. Now, I talk a lot about that series of videos. If you want to navigate this bull run, you're probably going to make mistakes in it, but that can help you as a guide, a master guide as to what we're doing and where we are. I found it helpful for me, so I hope it's helpful for others. I highly recommend you check it out. It's a $5 a month subscription. Connected to that Patreon is also a Discord where we discuss XRP. People share their insights and their charts. Like I said, it's a $5 a month subscription. I'll put a link to my Patreon in the description of this video. Anyways, back to this structure. So once it pulls out of this first structure, it enters the second structure. Look how much it pulled back in this second structure. So once again, there's two parts to this correction. There's the first part, and then there is the second part. This one was tiny. One of these has a kind of a two-part to this correction. Sometimes it takes place here, sometimes it takes place here. Here we have the first part, and then it moves up into the second part. That is a characteristic of this structure. So once it moves out of that, it goes into the third and final. This one was massive, this third correction. Once it pulls out of this one, it goes to the peak. And once again, this peak was a series of smaller peaks. This one was one peak with a consolidation before dropping. Let's move on to the next bull run structure. Okay, so that was this bull run structure. Now we are going to move all the way over to this bull run structure. This one's quite interesting, actually. So, and it really moved up quite a bit. So here we are on a 1 hour candle, and it's hard to see the very beginning. So let's zoom into the very beginning part. It leaves that third fractal, moves up, and this is really interesting. This structure right here, which is the first correction in the bull run structure, has a smaller structure that almost, I believe it does, it replicates the entire bull run structure. So in this move up to the first bull run structure, you have the first one, the second one, the third one, a peak, and then I believe that this is likely another just small version of a sideways range-bound time. I think that's fascinating. It's true to fractal nature as well. So that is the first bull run structure. This one's unique. It pulls back quite a bit, underscoring that this potential first correction can be a doozy to go through, and it can spark likely a lot of fear if something like this were to play out again. This one had a long bottoming out process, and then it started to finally move up and grind up out of this correction. It goes into the second correction, and we see the two parts to this. So we have the first correction and then the second correction. Remember how I told you one of them is usually in two parts? Now it's this one up here. It's in two parts. Once it pulls out of there, it goes into the third correction, which was quite substantial as well. And then finally to the peak. This one had two peaks and then a consolidation before declining and beginning the decline structure. Let's move on. And by the way, that was March 25th to May 17th, 2017. This is the third bull run structure. Let's move to the next structure. So that was this structure, and it moved up quite a bit. We will now move to the next bull run structure, which is the current all-time high, at least at the time of this recording. Hopefully that will change in the coming days. Let's zoom in on a 1 hour candle. So here is that bull run on a 1 hour time frame. Now this took place from December 10th, 2017 to January 4th, 2018. It leaves that third range fractal and moves up into the first corrective structure. This one is very interesting. So you have these smaller little corrections along the way, which we're having today. And then it gets to the biggest one that takes place so far in this move up. This is the usual telltale sign when it's the largest correction that takes place compared to what came before it. So it pulls back, has a bottoming out, if you will, and then begins to move up. This move up is aggressive. It gets higher than here, but it's a giant fake out. So once again, be ready for fake outs. Eventually, it makes it out of this correction and goes into that other correction. Here we see that two-part section down here versus up here, which was the last one. Here's the smaller correction of the two, and then it goes into the third one. Look how steep this third one is. So any one of these can be steep, but typically it's either the first one or the third one. We had one example where the second one was quite steep as well. It goes into the peak here, which is one large peak, and then there's two smaller consolidation peaks that follow it. However, that part right here is actually the beginning part of the structure. So it's really a large peak, and actually this peak is split up into smaller peaks. So this peak was really small. It played out really quick. Now, on my Patreon series of videos, I deep dive into this run-up. There are many things that repeat in the run-up to this peak that can notify you that we are approaching the peak. Once again, that series of videos is important for the time that we are in. It's pertinent to what we are going through. All right, so let's move on to the next bull run structure. So that would be over here. So here we are. This bull run takes place from February 28th to April 14th, 2021. It moves out of that sideways range-bound time. We have smaller corrections along the way, but once we get to that large first correction compared to anything else that came before it, that is a telltale sign that we have entered that first correction, and once again, it pulls back quite steeply, bottoms out, and begins to grind up. It doesn't really, it has this that could be a small fake out. Eventually, it moves into the next one. Let's zoom in. Now, here's the second one with the two corrections that take place. At least on an hour candle, you don't see one and then another one up here. It could be like that just on a smaller time frame. Once again, when a fractal repeats, the timing, height, and depth is always going to be original and unique, which makes for a unique structure. So even though we can't necessarily see it so easily, and it could very well be this, it just didn't go as high. So once it moves out of the second one, it goes into the third one, and once again, it pulls back quite a bit. Same with this second one. We have some nasty pullbacks on these corrections, and then it finally moves out and goes into the peak, and we have that first peak and then the two smaller consolidation peaks before declining. Once again, this move up, there are a sequence of corrections, small corrections that take place in this. Folks, in this video, I deep dive into those small corrections on the way to the peak. This is what I'm going to use, what's in this video, as my personal guide to know when the peak is taking place. Now, we may not catch the peak, but this at least helps us understand through historical perspectives what takes place on the way to the peak. So being aware of what is going to happen can improve your chances of actually detecting when we're heading up into the final peak. So folks, if we were to go to where we are today, now this is that 2021 bull run structure. We can see that we have been roughly completing in its own unique way what took place in 2021. We are now at this point where it moves up. We will soon enter that first correction. Now, it's not going to look exactly like this every single time this correction has taken place. It looks unique, but the basic idea is there, where it has a pullback, a bottoming out, and then a grind up and potential fake outs that take place in that grind up. So here we are on today's chart. This is on TradingView, and as you can see, we have left that third range bound fractal. We are now in the process of doing those smaller corrections. We are in the move up into that first correction. You have a rough idea of what that correction will throw at you. There's the second correction that comes after that with those two parts. The third correction is also potentially going to be steep, and then from that third correction, we go straight into the peak. Folks, with this knowledge, you can have a rough idea of where we are in the bull run structure. I hope this video has been helpful. If you did find it helpful, it'd be much appreciated if you hit that thumbs up button. You know, this is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor, but if you did enjoy this video and you would like to see more of this type of technical analysis, this type of analysis is unique. So if you enjoyed this and you're not yet a subscriber, I recommend hitting that subscribe button. I'll continue to follow up on this chart as it continues to develop. I'm so glad you caught this video. I hope you catch my next one. Have a great day, and bye for now.